welcome back to another Heather Mac Reacts. Today is Monday and we're getting a little malicious today. It's Malicious Compliance Monday, and if you like videos like this, make sure you subscribe because I post 5 times a week, every single week. Now, if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's get into this first malicious compliance story. This says, well, if you are quoting company rules, I'll follow them exactly as it is. Says this was done by an ex-colleague, so let's get into it. Well, they keep saying wheel instead of well. I'm thinking that's like a phone typo. Well, this happened a few years ago when I was working as a techno manager in an Indian startup IT firm. Don't know what any of those words mean. It was a small firm with less than 50 employees, and there were 2 founders. Let's call them Vicky and Joel. Vicky had worked a short time in an MNC, but was not able to stand authority and had to resign, whereas Joel had no real workplace experience. Vicky managed the place like a king, show tantrums, anger, etc. Joel was simply a yes man to Vicky. She sounds delightful. Now, we had an HR lady who was okay-ish with the older employees and strict with the newer ones. As for me, I was not that good technically compared to my colleagues, but was good at people management. Also, I was one of the longest serving employees too. I was friendly with most of the employees, especially the new ones. This was due to the fact that I knew it was not easy to work with the founders, and I wanted the show to continue as it was my first company too. You know, usually startups are like fun, easygoing places to work at because there's a lot of downsides to working for a startup. Like, there's not always like great job security, and maybe the pay isn't so great. So the owners usually make up for it by being cool and having like pizza parties and like alcohol outings and like ping pong tables. These people have gone the opposite direction, unfortunately. So a new joinee named Bob joins, and after 6 months, he is assigned to a project. Because of the time zone difference, he worked up to 4 to 5 a.m., and the client too was happy with him. Since he was sleeping late, this guy always reported at nearly 11:30 a.m. in the office. Yeah, I don't blame him. Out of the blue, founder calls me in HR and asks why Bob is late to the office and said he has to be in the office by 10 a.m. as the other guys. BTW forgot to mention Vicky and Joel came into the office only once in a while, and it was pre-corona times, but since they are founders, let's ignore that. HR lady took the responsibility of asking Bob about that. At this point, HR lady is not aware of Bob's working hours. I interrupted and told her he's leaving the office by 2 to 4 a.m. and it's kind of unfair to ask him to come early. Vicky cut me off and says, no, he has to follow rules, and this is the basic etiquette when working in this office. I said, okay. Once again, Vicky showing how delightful she is to work for. HR lady calls Bob in her office and questions him about the timings, to which Bob says, okay, ma'am, we'll comply. Now, Bob and me have a good rapport, and he comes directly to me to tell me what happened with the HR. Then I ask him, what are you going to do? To which he says, I will ask for a clarification via mail, maybe email, and then we'll comply. I understood where it's going and give him best of luck, trying hard to contain my laughter. I see where this is going as well. After 10 minutes, HR comes to me with her laptop in panic and shows me the email which Bob has sent. He has CC'd the founders, the client head he's reporting to, and has written something along the lines of, hi client head name, this is to inform you that as a request from my office to comply to the office timings, from tomorrow onwards, my work timings will be 10 a.m. IST, which is some kind of time zone that I'm unfamiliar with, to 7 p.m. IST, i.e. 10:30 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. Chicago time. I request you to change your meeting times to those times when I am available, and in any inconveniences, please contact HR, Vicky, or Joel. Thanks, Bob. Well, y'all asked for it, didn't you? I asked the HR if this was somewhere mentioned in the offer letter, and she nods yes. Then I tell her to take the matter to Vicky. At Vicky's room, since the narcissist guy he is, Vicky's a man? Okay. He scolds HR for nothing that is in the offer letter, then asks her to correct this. She goes to Bob and asks for correction, to which Bob firmly says no. HR lady, being stupid, tells someone that she told this because Vicky asked her to, and Bob still stands firm and asks HR if Vicky has said it, then asks Vicky to formally reply in the email thread asking to revert to his old timings. Bob also says that he is not going to go back to old timings unless Vicky emails, and they have approximately 4 hours to do so before the client reacts. HR comes to me for help, and we go together to Vicky's room and brief. Vicky lashes out at HR, and at this point I interrupt and says it's better to address the issue, as in 4 hours client will get involved and we have to make a decision before that. Vicky hesitantly sends out the email saying it was a mistake, as Bob's special case was not considered during the decision making, and Bob can continue his earlier timings. As I walked back to the office, I saw Bob looking at me and laughing really hard, and I had to hold a straight face as HR lady was also behind me. Needless to say, Bob has his timings intact. You want me to follow the schedule that everyone else works? Sure thing, Buster. I'm guessing they're in India, and that's why his work schedule is so crazy to match up to Chicago time. Like, imagine. No freaking thank you. The fact that he was willing to shift his schedule around to accommodate that client, y'all should have been kissing his butt from the beginning. Anyway, he tried to maliciously comply, but y'all weren't happy with that either. That was lovely, that was delicious, and complicious. I'm sorry, y'all. It's been a long day already. I've been up since 7 and it is now 2. That's a long time for someone who's 34 weeks pregnant. Anyway, let's get on to the next story. This says, don't bother anymore. Fine, I won't. Y'all know I love these malicious compliance titles. I used to live in an apartment building that had shops on the main level. The building next door was the same. The two buildings shared a wall. My building had assigned parking and yellow paper notes to put in our car windows. A restaurant opened in the building next door. Their owner, manager, and staff began parking in my spot, as well as our neighbors. I spoke to the owner and she said she would talk to them again, but didn't think it would help. They were even parking in her spot. Interesting. Every night I would get home, call them, and ask the vehicle be moved. I was getting tired of this when one night they put the manager on because they were busy and didn't have time to deal with my request. He did do it, but told me they wouldn't do it again and I was to stop calling them. I suggested they stop parking in my assigned spot. He told me he had too many staff to control where they parked, and he was sure they were not parking in my spot and it was probably a customer. You know, because customers always park behind a business and then walk around to the front to get in. Yeah, it makes total sense. The next time I worked evening shifts. I got home and this time there was a Range Rover parked in my spot. I dutifully called the tow truck and not the restaurant. I had to wait for a second tow truck because the first one was not equipped to move a vehicle of that type. Something about being jacked up and stuff. They explained it, and the wait was because I didn't know enough to be able to answer their questions about the truck so they could send out the right truck first. They towed it and I went in and went to bed. Doesn't it just feel good in the soul? Like y'all don't want me to call you anymore and bother you? You got it. Imagine, so now we live in a house, and so my parking spot is the blissful little garage spot that I love so much. My husband parks in the driveway because we have too much crap in the garage to have 2 cars in there. But previous to this, we lived in an apartment building development, and the parking was free for all. But before this, we lived in Providence, and we parked basically on the back lawn that was just like a parking gravel lot thing for the house. And there wasn't exactly assigned spots, but since we lived there first, we always parked in the same spots, and so no one else parked in our spots. But one year there was going to be a storm, and the back lot was down an incline. So if you wanted to get up out of there, you weren't getting out of there if it was covered in snow, and it was also gravel, so it couldn't really be shoveled. And we knew we'd be stuck there all day long, if not longer. So what we did was we parked on the little postage stamp size front lawn, because you weren't allowed to park on the streets in Providence overnight. So that was a big no-no. But we parked on the front lawn so that we would just have a little bit to shovel to get get out, right? So that night it snowed, and the next day it was not snowing anymore. So we shoveled ourselves out and we drove somewhere, probably Dunkin' Donuts, to get a coffee. And we come back and our upstairs neighbor is parked their fat asses in our freaking spot. I was like, hi, hello, can I help you? Because mind you, we were on the ground floor, so our entrance was that front door and that patio that was right next to this tiny little yard. So if anyone had rights to park on the front yard, it was kind of us, but also we parked there first. So we were the ones that put our car there. And so there wasn't snow there. And then we dug ourselves out. who do you think you are to park in our spot? If y'all have ever lived in a snowy place, you know goddamn well if someone digs out that spot, you are not entitled to that spot. They're entitled to that spot because they're the ones who did the work for it. You don't get to just swoop in and freaking take their spot, okay? So yeah, so I like rolled down my window. I was like, hey, are you guys like moving this car soon? Because they were like taking groceries out of it. And the guy was like, yeah, we'll move soon. I'm sorry, bitch. I'm not a fucking comedian. What's so funny? Asshole. I hated him. Hated him so much. Anyway, back to the story. A few hours later, I was awakened by a phone call from the towing company. I had towed the owner, and he was telling them that it was his parking spot and that I had no right to tow him. Oh, isn't that fucking interesting, you dick? They were going to bill me for the tow. I told the caller about my landlord's parking permits, the numerous phone calls to have them moved, about being told not to bother them anymore, and that his restaurant was in the next building with a separate parking lot. We said goodbye, and I never heard anything more about it. I was also able to park in my spot after that. Wow. The fucking balls on that guy. I told my neighbor and he told me just to be safe, I should tell the owner of the other building. I popped into her shop and told her. She replied with something to the effect of, you towed the Range Rover? I said yes. She started to laugh and basically said, good for you, and told me it was the restaurant owner's truck. Still makes me smile when I think of it. You told me not to call. I didn't call. I made a different call and got your ass out of my parking spot. Oh, so what I was getting at as far as parking spots go, imagine working the night shift and coming home at the end of the night, and every fucking night someone is in your parking spot, the one that was assigned to you. That is probably either paid for by you out of your pocket or part of your rent. This is where you are allowed to park, and these entitled a-holes keep parking in your spot. I don't freaking think so. That shit would drive me nuts, and I would have called the tow company a long freaking time ago. I wouldn't have been giving them those courtesy calls to the restaurant because I'm a petty bitch. Anyway, that was malicious. That was delicious. That was compliance. I loved it. Let's get on to the next story. This says, I wasted 2 hours of my sister's time because she refused to listen to me. Do y'all remember that trend? Waste his time, 20 something. It was petty. And some of it was downright mean, but I'm not gonna lie, I chuckled at a few of those. Anyway, let's see what the story says. When I was younger, around a decade ago, I used to love two things, cars and roads. Still to this day, I love cars, but the way I loved roads was through maps. My favorite activity when I was bored was to go on the Maps app and look at the highways that surrounded my area. My oldest sister at the time was the only sibling of mine who had a license. One summer day, she was bored and decided to take me and her boyfriend to an amusement park an hour and a half away from home. The story begins on the way back. My father needed the car at the car dealership as it was scheduled to have a routine maintenance done the next morning. My father sent her the address of the dealership and requested that she drop the car off and he will go and pick us up at the dealer. Now that the context is out of the way, here is where my sister made a mistake. She typed in the address and clicked on the nearest place with the road. The issue is that the nearest place with that road was a town going an hour in the opposite direction. She gets onto the road I will call State Route 100. This intersects with Interstate 1, which we were supposed to get onto. When she passes the highway, this following interaction ensues. Me, you were supposed to make that right. Her, that's not what the map says. 5 minutes later, I say again, me, we're heading in the wrong direction. This does not go home. Her, maybe it's an alternate route that's faster. Me, I don't think a road going in the opposite direction is faster. She cuts me off. Her, now annoyed, listen, I'm going to focus on what the map says, not you, so just stop already. No problem, bitch. And with that, I followed her instruction. After all, why would I complain on going on a road I have never been on? From what I remember after that, we stopped for gas about half an hour in. My sister was still convinced we were going in the right direction, but why should I correct her? She is listening to the map after all. The fallout. We hit an expressway and my sister is convinced we made it home and is pleased with herself. This was until an overhead sign said, Town B Regional Airport 1 mile. At this point, my sister realized her mistake. She starts freaking out and saying, I didn't know this road went here. I was following the map. OP, why didn't you tell me we were going the wrong way? Bitch, you really had the nerve. You really had the nerve. I was scared of her getting mad at me, so I just said, after you told me to stop, I just stopped paying attention to where you were going. Get mad at me for trying to tell you what you didn't want to hear. She eventually pulled into a gas station and saw where she set her GPS to. After correcting her mistake, we head the opposite direction, although the car ride was rather silent. We eventually see signs for the amusement park we started at because she had to turn left at the road I originally told her to turn at. And then that is how I turned to drive supposedly to be an hour and a half into 3.5 hour journey. Years have passed since this happened, and I told my father, who thought it was hysterical. I often consider telling my sister, but we sadly rarely speak anymore. I wonder freaking why with an attitude like that. Thank you for reading. Have a happy new year. Okay. You freaking tried. It's not like you sat in the back going, this dumb bitch, and just let her make the mistake. You tried twice or 3 times, depending on the way the actual conversation went. You tried multiple times to inform her of her mistake, and she thought she knew it all. So now she has to pay extra gas. Loved it. You only did what you had to do. You only did what you were left to do. So I don't feel bad for her. Anyway, let's get on to the next story. This says failed malicious compliance. I'm a little sad that it's failed because I love a good malicious compliance, but let's see what the story says. Background to this, my mother is a terrible driver, gets very distracted, and has had many accidents. Yikes. I'd have been in my late teens when this happened. We took her weekly spin to the grandparents' house in a village about an hour's drive outside the city. It had been a few years since I'd been in the car with her. I'd chosen to live with my dad a few years prior, so my tolerance to her driving had dropped significantly. Several times as we drove out of the city, she had either run red lights, turned from the wrong lane, or stayed sitting in the lights after they had changed to green because she wasn't paying attention. Sounds like a menace who should have her license taken away. After I said something, squeaked in fear 3 or 4 times, I was firmly told to shut up and not say another word about her driving. I can't imagine why you wanted to live with your dad instead of her. So I gripped the sides of my seat cushion and gritted my teeth and tried to come to terms with my mortality. About 20 kilometers out of town on a long straight road my mother had driven literally 1,000 times before, there was some unexpected road work in the distance. Couple of kilometers down the road, full visibility, minimal traffic. One tiny red car stopped at the lights, which are red in the distance. I glance over and she's looking out the side window, communing with the cloud, because that's what she does. Terrifying menace, take her off the roads. Not to worry, she'll eventually have to look at the road, right? You don't know my mother. Now we're a kilometer away, lights are still red, car is there and not so tiny, 800 meters, 500 meters. She's still looking out the side window, thinking deep cloud related thoughts, still doing 80. I'm thinking this is obviously not in America, so it's probably 80 kilometers, not 80 miles an hour. Like, let's freaking hope. I'm frankly petrified at this point because my desire for malicious compliance is warring with my desire to live, and we are still doing 80 and not very small at all. Red car is still stopped at the red light. At about 200 meters out, my will to live wins out, and I scream, "Stop!" She slams on the brakes, and a split second of anger rolls off her before she wakes the fuck up and we skid, sliding forward helplessly. I feel like I could see the eyes of the guy in front of me in the rearview mirror looking at us with horror. Some trauma bonding, I am sure. Our car comes to a stop with only the slightest of crunching sounds. I think we must have shaved years off his life. The aftermath was a lot of screaming from him, hysterical laughing from me, which did not help at all. I don't remember anything after that, a calm and side effect of dealing with my mother. So that is my failed malicious compliance. Please forgive me. I hope it still fits in the sub. Edit for all the worried people out there. This was 3 decades ago, and she has gone from being very blasé and fast to very paranoid and slow, and only drives to the local shops now. Thank freaking goodness for that. Yikes. Okay, I mean, failed malicious compliance. Yeah, I get it now, but like, yikes on freaking trikes. Holy crap. Anyway, that's all the malicious compliance I have for you today. I would like to know which was your favorite in the comments. Don't forget, we have a playlist over here of other malicious compliance videos that you can binge. Please don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.